The CFO's words still echo in my mind as I watch the stock ticker turn blood red on every screen across Wall Street. "Pack your trash, you're too expensive," he sneered just 3 hours ago. Now the entire financial district has gone silent. Trading boards flash the same devastating message: authorizing officer missing, trading halted. Our company's IPO price drops from $28 to zero in mere seconds. I'm Colette, the fired chief technology officer, and I hold the only digital key that can save them. But they chose greed over loyalty. My name is Colette Rodriguez, and until this morning, I was the 32-year-old Chief Technology Officer of TechVantage Solutions, a cutting-edge financial technology company that was supposed to make history today with its initial public offering. Instead, I'm sitting in my Honda Civic in the parking garage beneath our Manhattan headquarters, watching my life's work crumble because of the very people I trusted most. 6 months ago, I designed something revolutionary for our company. TechVantage needed an absolutely foolproof authorization system for our S-1 filing process with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The IPO required multiple layers of digital security that no hacker insider threat or technical failure could compromise. I spent countless nights engineering a proprietary blockchain authorization protocol that would make our public offering the most secure in Wall Street history. The system was elegant in its complexity. It required 3 components that could never be separated or replicated: my biometric handprint scan, my voice recognition pattern recorded at 17 different frequencies, and a cryptographic signature that I created using quantum encryption algorithms. Even if someone stole my laptop, hacked our servers, or tortured the passwords out of me, they could never authorize the filing without my physical presence and voluntary cooperation. I graduated from MIT 5 years ago with a degree in computer science and cryptographic systems. TechVantage hired me straight out of college when we were just 12 people working out of a converted warehouse in Queens. I helped build this company from a startup with big dreams into an IPO-ready corporation worth $400 million. I knew every line of code, every security protocol, every financial algorithm that made our platform work. Harold Brennan, our chief financial officer, used to call me the digital backbone of TechVantage. He was a silver-haired man in his 50s who wore expensive suits and drove a Tesla Model S. Harold had 20 years of Wall Street experience and connections throughout the financial industry. When investors visited, he always introduced me as the brilliant mind who makes our technology unbreakable. My deputy, Jake Patterson, was someone I considered a close friend. We worked side by side for 3 years, debugging code until midnight, sharing Chinese takeout while troubleshooting server crashes, and celebrating every milestone together. Jake was 29, a Stanford graduate who understood our systems almost as well as I did. I trusted him with administrative access to most of our databases because he had proven himself reliable, creative, and completely loyal to our mission. This morning started like any other. I arrived at the office at 6:30, grabbing coffee from the lobby cart and checking overnight system reports. Our IPO was scheduled for 2:45 this afternoon, and I wanted to run final diagnostic tests on all our security protocols. The authorization system showed green lights across every metric. Everything was ready. At 9:15, I noticed something strange in my security logs. Someone had been accessing financial databases that were supposed to be restricted during the pre-IPO quiet period. The access timestamps showed activity at unusual hours, and the queries focused on vendor payment records and contract documentation. My security training kicked in immediately. This pattern suggested either a serious breach or insider fraud. I traced the access logs back to Harold's executive account and Jake's administrative credentials. They had been pulling financial records for 3 weeks, focusing specifically on payment authorizations and contract amendments. The data they accessed included confidential vendor agreements, consultant payments, and offshore banking information that I had never seen before. My stomach dropped as I realized what I was looking at. Harold and Jake had been conducting secret meetings with our competitors. The system logs showed they had downloaded proprietary algorithms, client databases, and strategic planning documents. They were selling company secrets while preparing to go public. I confronted Harold in his corner office at 10:30. His mahogany desk was covered with IPO prospectuses and champagne bottles ready for the closing bell celebration. Harold, we need to discuss the unauthorized database access from your account. He didn't even look surprised. Colette, you're always paranoid about security. Everything is fine. These logs show systematic data theft. You and Jake have been accessing restricted financial records and downloading proprietary information. I have evidence that you've been sharing this data with external parties. Harold's expression hardened. He closed his laptop and leaned back in his leather chair. You're making serious accusations without understanding the full picture. The full picture is that you're committing securities fraud hours before our IPO. I'm reporting this to the SEC immediately. Harold stood up slowly, his face cold as winter. Colette, you're becoming a liability. The board voted unanimously last night. Your employment with TechVantage Solutions is terminated effective immediately. The words hit me like a physical blow. You're firing me. Today you can't authorize the S-1 filing without me. We'll figure that out. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. I stared at him in disbelief. Harold, I built the authorization system. It requires my biometric signature. Without me, there is no IPO. You should have thought about that before threatening the company's leadership with false accusations. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. I recognized them both. Tom had worked the night shift for 2 years, and Maria had started just 6 months ago. They looked uncomfortable but determined. Ma'am, we need to escort you to your office to collect your things, Tom said quietly. As I walked through the office toward my corner workspace, I saw Jake hunched over his computer, refusing to make eye contact. The man I considered a friend wouldn't even acknowledge my existence. Other colleagues whispered and stared as the security escort made our situation obvious to everyone. I packed my MIT diploma, family photos, and personal laptop into a cardboard box, while Maria and Tom watched every movement. My company laptop badge and access cards went into a separate container that they would keep. The humiliation burned in my chest as I realized that every person in that office would soon know I had been terminated. Walking through the lobby with my box of belongings felt like a walk of shame. The same security desk where I had badged in thousands of times now represented the end of 5 years of dedication and hard work. The doorman, who always greeted me with a smile, looked away as I passed. Sitting in my car in the parking garage, I tried to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed with a new email notification. The termination paperwork had already arrived, citing performance issues and inappropriate conduct that I knew were complete fabrications. They had planned this carefully, creating a paper trail to justify removing me just hours before the IPO. Then I opened my personal security app, the one I used to monitor access attempts to the authorization system. My blood ran cold as I saw the logs. Harold and Jake had been trying to break into my authorization protocols for the past hour. 17 failed attempts showed they were desperately trying to bypass the biometric requirements and forge my digital signature. They had fired me thinking they could steal my access codes and proceed with the IPO as planned. But they had underestimated the security system I built. Every failed attempt was logged, time-stamped, and automatically reported to federal financial crime databases as potential securities fraud. I drove to my apartment in Brooklyn, hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. The 30-minute drive gave me time to think, but every thought led to the same devastating conclusion. Harold and Jake had betrayed everything we built together, and they were about to destroy our company trying to cover their tracks. My laptop was set up on my kitchen table within minutes of arriving home. The authorization system breach attempts had increased to 41 failures while I was driving. Each attempt triggered automatic security alerts that were being sent to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My phone started ringing at 11:45. The first call was from David Thornton, chairman of our board of directors. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came from Jennifer Walsh, our lead investor from Silverbrook Capital. I ignored that one too. By noon, I had 17 missed calls from board members, investors, regulatory officials, and financial journalists. I wasn't ready to talk to anyone yet. Instead, I monitored the situation through financial news websites and social media. TechVantage Solutions was trending on Twitter, but not for the right reasons. The first news alert appeared at 12:30 from Bloomberg. TechVantage IPO delayed due to technical authorization issues. The second alert from Reuters was more concerning. Fintech company faces potential securities violations hours before public offering. My phone rang again. Harold's name appeared on the screen. I answered this time, curious to hear what excuse he would offer. "Colette." His voice was strained, completely different from the confident tone he had used while firing me. "We need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding, Harold. You fired me and immediately tried to hack into my authorization system. Every attempt is logged and reported to federal authorities. Listen carefully. You're making a mistake that will hurt thousands of innocent investors. You're the one who chose to commit securities fraud. Colette, be reasonable. The IPO is in less than 3 hours. We can work this out." I hung up without responding. Within minutes, my phone rang again, this time from an unknown number with a Washington, D.C. area code. Ms. Rodriguez. This is Agent Patricia Morrison with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. We need to speak with you regarding irregularities in TechVantage Solutions' public offering process. My heart pounded. Agent Morrison, I was terminated this morning after discovering evidence of insider fraud. The authorization system breaches you're seeing are not authorized by me. We understand you control the digital authorization required for the S-1 filing. Can you explain why the system is showing multiple failed access attempts? Harold Brennan, the CFO, and Jake Patterson, my former deputy, are trying to bypass security protocols after firing me. They've been stealing company data and selling it to competitors. Ms. Rodriguez will need you to come in for questioning. There are allegations that you're holding the company hostage. The line went dead. I realized that Harold had gotten to the FBI first, spinning the story to make me look like the criminal. He was portraying himself as the victim of a disgruntled employee's revenge scheme. My former assistant Sarah called at 1:15. Sarah was 24, fresh out of college, and had worked directly with me for 8 months. She was whispering, obviously calling from a bathroom or supply closet. "Colette, I can't talk long. Harold is losing his mind. He's screaming at the IT department demanding they override your security system. He hired some external hackers who showed up an hour ago with briefcases full of equipment. Sarah, document everything you see. Take photos if you can do it safely. He told everyone you had a mental breakdown and you're trying to sabotage the company. But Colette, I found something weird. Harold has been shredding documents all morning. Boxes of financial records are being destroyed." "What kind of documents?" "Vendor contracts, payment authorization stuff with foreign bank logos." And Colette, Jake looks terrified. I don't think this was his idea. The call ended abruptly. I assumed Sarah had been discovered or had to return to work. At 1:30, CNBC broke the story that would change everything. Maria Gonzalez, their financial correspondent, was reporting live from outside our building. Sources inside TechVantage Solutions confirm that a terminated employee is preventing the company from completing its initial public offering by refusing to provide necessary authorization codes. The news report painted me as a vindictive former employee holding the company hostage. They showed my professional headshot with the caption, "Colette Rodriguez, the woman behind the TechVantage crisis. Harold appeared on camera perfectly composed, describing me as someone who had become increasingly unstable and vindictive in recent weeks. My phone exploded with text messages. College friends, former colleagues, and family members were asking if the news reports were accurate. Social media was already turning against me with hashtags like TechVantage terrorist and corporate hostage trending nationally. The most devastating message came from my former roommate at MIT. Colette, please tell me this isn't true. The person they're describing doesn't sound like you at all. At 2 o'clock, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Using my personal laptop, I accessed TechVantage's financial databases through a backdoor administrative account that I had created for emergency purposes. Harold and Jake didn't know this account existed because I had built it into the system architecture as a failsafe. What I found was worse than insider trading or data theft. Harold had been systematically embezzling money from TechVantage for nearly 2 years. Fake vendor payments, inflated consulting contracts, and mysterious offshore transfers totaled almost $8 million. Jake had helped by creating fraudulent technical invoicing for security consulting services that never existed. The IPO wasn't just their exit strategy for selling company secrets. It was their plan to cover up massive financial fraud. They needed the influx of public investment money to hide the missing funds before an upcoming audit that was scheduled for next month. My termination wasn't about performance or personality conflicts. They had fired me because I was the only person in the company with administrative access to all financial systems. I could detect their fraud, trace their theft, and provide evidence to destroy them both. But they had made a critical miscalculation. They assumed they could bypass my authorization system and proceed with the IPO while I was safely out of the way. Instead, their failed hacking attempts had triggered automatic fraud detection protocols that were now under investigation by 3 federal agencies. At 2:15, I watched the opening bell ceremony on CNBC. Harold was there on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, shaking hands with officials and posing for photos next to the TechVantage banner. He was acting confident and celebratory, as if everything was proceeding normally, but I could see the strain in his expression when he thought cameras weren't focused on him. He kept checking his phone, presumably getting updates about the failed authorization attempts. Trading was supposed to begin in 30 minutes, and he had no way to complete the S-1 filing process. During a brief interview, Harold told the reporter, "We've resolved our technical issues. TechVantage will begin trading precisely at 2:45 as scheduled. Our investors can be confident in our technology and our leadership." He was lying to millions of viewers, buying time while desperately trying to break into my security system. But I had designed that system to be unbreakable, even by the most sophisticated hacking tools available. Every minute they spent trying to crack it generated more evidence of securities fraud that federal investigators were already analyzing. At 2:20, someone knocked on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw my sister Emma standing in the hallway wearing her navy blue business suit and carrying her leather briefcase. Emma was 35, 3 years older than me, and worked as a corporate attorney for Blackstone and Associates, one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms. I opened the door expecting comfort and support from my only family member in New York. Instead, Emma walked past me into the living room with a cold, business-like expression that I had never seen her direct toward me before. "Colette, we need to discuss your situation with TechVantage." "Kia." "Emma, thank God you're here. Harold and Jake have been committing massive fraud, and they fired me to cover it up. I have evidence of $8 million in embezzlement." Emma set her briefcase on my coffee table and opened it carefully. "Colette, I need you to listen to what I'm about to tell you without interrupting." Something in her tone made my stomach clench with dread. "What's going on?" "I've been working with TechVantage's legal team for the past 2 weeks, helping them prepare documentation for your termination. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank onto my couch, staring at my sister in disbelief. You knew they were going to fire me. The company has been documenting performance issues and erratic behavior for months. You were becoming impossible to work with, paranoid about imaginary threats and hostile toward management. Emma, that's not true. I discovered evidence of securities fraud and embezzlement. You've been making wild accusations without evidence, threatening colleagues and creating a hostile work environment. Harold showed me emails where you accused him of criminal activity based on routine financial transactions. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the evidence I had compiled. Look at these database logs. Look at the unauthorized access patterns. Look at the fake vendor payments. Emma glanced at the screen dismissively. Colette, you're interpreting normal business activities as criminal conspiracies. This is exactly the kind of paranoid thinking that concerned your supervisors. My supervisors, Emma, I was the CTO. Harold and Jake reported to the board, not to me. The board received multiple complaints about your behavior. You were becoming a liability to the company and its investors. I stared at my sister, trying to understand how she could believe such obvious lies. Emma, you know me. You know I would never sabotage a company I helped build. I know you've been under tremendous stress. The pressure of the IPO, the responsibility you've been carrying, the long hours, it's affected your judgment. Whose judgment? Emma. Harold is embezzling money. Jake is helping him cover it up. They fired me because I discovered their fraud. Emma pulled a thick folder from her briefcase. Colette, I need you to sign these documents authorizing the transfer of your security credentials to the company's interim technology officer. Absolutely not. Those credentials are the only thing preventing them from completing their fraud. Colette, thousands of innocent investors will lose their retirement savings if this IPO fails. Pension funds, college endowments, ordinary families who believed in this company. I looked at the documents Emma was asking me to sign. They would transfer complete control of the authorization system to Jake Patterson, the same person who had been helping Harold steal millions of dollars. Emma, I won't be part of covering up financial crimes. My sister's expression hardened further. Colette, if you don't cooperate, the company will file criminal charges against you for computer fraud, market manipulation, and securities violations. You could face 20 years in federal prison. They're bluffing. I have evidence of their crimes. Evidence of what? Routine business transactions that you're misinterpreting because of your mental state. The phrase mental state made me realize how carefully this had been planned. They weren't just firing me. They were building a case that I was mentally unstable, paranoid, and potentially dangerous. Emma, why are you doing this? For the first time, my sister looked uncomfortable. She avoided eye contact and fidgeted with her briefcase latches. I'm trying to help you avoid destroying your career and your life over a misunderstanding. This isn't a misunderstanding. Harold is stealing millions of dollars. Emma stood up abruptly. Colette, I need you to think about Mom and Dad. Think about our family's reputation. Think about the thousands of people who will be hurt if you continue this vindictive behavior. Vindictive behavior, Emma. I'm trying to prevent securities fraud. You're trying to get revenge against people who made difficult business decisions. Sign the documents, Colette. Let the IPO proceed. Let innocent people keep their investments. I stared at the authorization transfer papers, realizing that signing them would make me complicit in the very fraud I was trying to expose. I won't sign anything. Emma packed the documents back into her briefcase with sharp, angry movements. Colette, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. When this is over, when you realize what you've done to innocent people, remember that I tried to help you. She headed toward the door, then turned back with an expression I had never seen before. You know what, Colette? Maybe Harold is right. Maybe you have become impossible to work with. Maybe you are paranoid and vindictive and destructive. Emma, I'm your sister. My sister wouldn't hold thousands of innocent investors hostage because of imaginary grievances. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with the devastating realization that even my own family believed the lies Harold had spread about me. But something about Emma's behavior bothered me beyond the obvious betrayal. She had seemed nervous, defensive, almost guilty about something more than just legal representation. I opened my laptop and used my administrative access to search TechVantage's email servers for any correspondence involving Emma's law firm. What I found made me physically sick. Emma hadn't just been working with TechVantage's legal team. She had been dating Jake Patterson for 6 months. Their email correspondence showed romantic dinners, weekend trips, and intimate conversations about their future together. Jake had been feeding Emma confidential information about my work, my concerns about financial irregularities, and my growing suspicions about Harold's activities. The emails revealed the truth about my termination. Emma had leaked my concerns about Harold to Jake during Pillow Talk 3 weeks ago. Jake had immediately warned Harold, giving them time to plan my firing, create false performance documentation, and develop a strategy to portray me as mentally unstable. This wasn't about business decisions or company loyalty. Emma had chosen her romantic relationship with Jake over her loyalty to her own sister. She had helped them destroy my career and reputation to protect the man she was sleeping with. My phone rang. Mom's number appeared on the screen. "Colette, honey, Emma called me. She's worried about you." "Mom, what did she tell you?" "She said you're having some kind of breakdown at work, making accusations against your colleagues. She said you might need professional help." Even my mother, who had raised me and knew my character better than anyone, was beginning to believe that I was mentally unstable. Harold's strategy was working perfectly. By the time this was over, everyone I cared about would think I was a vindictive, paranoid ex-employee who had sabotaged her own company out of spite. But as I sat in my apartment watching the clock tick toward 2:45, I realized something important. I had access to information that Harold and Jake didn't know I possessed. I had evidence of their fraud that they couldn't destroy or deny, and I had built an authorization system that they couldn't crack no matter how many hackers they hired or how many threats they made. The real question was whether I had the courage to use that power to expose the truth, even if it meant going to war against my former colleagues, my own sister, and everyone else who had chosen to believe their lies instead of investigating the evidence I had tried to show them. At 2:43, I made my decision. At 2:45 exactly, I was watching CNBC's live coverage of the stock market opening when TechVantage's trading debut became a catastrophe that would dominate financial news for weeks. The reporter on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange was standing next to Harold, who was smiling confidently as the opening bell rang. "TechVantage Solutions is set to begin trading momentarily," the reporter announced. "This fintech company has generated significant investor interest with their revolutionary blockchain technology." Then everything went wrong at once. Instead of displaying TechVantage's stock price, every trading screen in the exchange flashed the same red warning: "Authorizing officer missing, trading halted, S-1 filing incomplete." The camera captured Harold's face as he watched his carefully orchestrated plan collapse in real time. His confident smile vanished, replaced by confusion and growing panic, as exchange officials surrounded him with questions he couldn't answer. Within minutes, TechVantage's stock price dropped from its intended opening of $28 per share to zero. The automated trading systems had detected the incomplete S-1 filing and immediately suspended all activity to prevent potential securities violations. By 3 o'clock, news vans were parked outside my apartment building in Brooklyn. Somehow, reporters had discovered my address and were setting up cameras on the sidewalk. I watched from my window as they prepared for live broadcasts that would paint me as the villain in this story. Harold's press conference at 3:30 was a masterpiece of manipulation and misdirection. Standing behind a podium in TechVantage's conference room, flanked by corporate lawyers and public relations specialists, he delivered a performance that almost convinced me of my own guilt. "Ladies and gentlemen, TechVantage Solutions has been the victim of corporate sabotage by a disgruntled former employee," Harold announced to the assembled reporters. Colette Rodriguez, our former chief technology officer, was terminated this morning due to increasingly erratic behavior and performance issues. The cameras focused on Harold's grave expression as he continued his character assassination. Ms. Rodriguez designed our authorization system with the apparent intention of holding the company hostage if her employment was ever terminated. She has refused multiple requests to cooperate with the orderly transfer of her security credentials. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal raised her hand. Mr. Brennan, what specific performance issues led to Ms. Rodriguez's termination? Over the past several months, Ms. Rodriguez became increasingly paranoid, making unfounded accusations against colleagues and creating a hostile work environment. She threatened to sabotage our IPO if we didn't meet her demands for additional compensation and control over company operations. Every word was a carefully crafted lie, but Harold delivered them with the conviction of someone telling the absolute truth. He had anticipated questions about my termination and prepared answers that portrayed me as greedy, vindictive, and potentially unstable. Has Ms. Rodriguez made any demands for money or other compensation in exchange for her cooperation? Asked a reporter from Bloomberg. She has indicated that she expects significant financial compensation and public acknowledgement that her termination was unjustified. We cannot and will not negotiate with someone who is holding our investors hostage. Harold's press conference was broadcast live on every major financial network. Within hours, social media exploded with hashtags like TechVantage terrorist and corporate hostage. My professional headshot was everywhere, accompanied by captions describing me as a disgruntled former employee and the woman who crashed an IPO. The comments sections were brutal. Investors who had lost money blamed me personally for their losses. People called for my arrest, my prosecution, and worse. Someone posted what they claimed was my home address, encouraging others to visit me to demand their money back. My college roommate texted, "Colette, please tell me there's more to this story. The person they're describing doesn't sound like you." My former supervisor from my internship at Goldman Sachs called and left a voicemail. "Colette, I'm watching the news about TechVantage. I worked with you for 6 months and I never saw any signs of the behavior they're describing. Please call me if you need character references." But for every person who doubted the official narrative, there were hundreds who accepted Harold's version without question. Financial blogs published articles analyzing my psychological profile and speculating about my motivations. Employment lawyers appeared on television discussing how companies could protect themselves from rogue employees like me. At 4:15, the first criminal charges were filed. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office announced that they were investigating me for computer fraud, market manipulation, and securities violations. The charges carried potential sentences totaling 45 years in federal prison. My photo appeared on the evening news with the caption, "Wanted for questioning." Police officers arrived at my building at 5:30 with a warrant for my arrest on suspicion of corporate cyber terrorism. I escaped through the building's service entrance while they were searching my apartment. The fire escape led to an alley behind the building where I could see more news vans arriving on the street. My face was on every television screen, my name was trending on Twitter, and my reputation was being destroyed by the hour. I found refuge in a coffee shop in Park Slope, keeping my baseball cap pulled low and avoiding eye contact with other customers. On the television above the counter, Harold was giving another interview, this time to Anderson Cooper. "Colette Rodriguez has single-handedly destroyed the retirement savings of thousands of ordinary Americans," Harold said, his expression conveying perfectly rehearsed concern and disappointment. "Teachers, firefighters, nurses who invested their pension funds in TechVantage have lost everything because of one person's vindictive behavior." Anderson Cooper leaned forward. "Mr. Brennan, some critics are asking why TechVantage designed an authorization system that could be held hostage by a single employee." Harold's response was flawless. "We trusted Ms. Rodriguez completely. She designed the system to be secure against external threats. We never imagined that the threat would come from within, from someone we considered family. The interview included testimonials from affected investors. A retired teacher from Ohio cried as she explained that her pension fund had invested heavily in TechVantage. A young couple from Denver described how they had planned to use their stock profits to buy their first home. Every story was heartbreaking, and every story blamed me personally for their financial losses. Harold had successfully shifted the narrative from corporate fraud to personal betrayal, from criminal conspiracy to individual revenge. My phone showed hundreds of missed calls from unknown numbers. The voicemails ranged from death threats to offers from tabloid journalists who wanted to buy my side of the story. Several messages claimed to be from federal agents, though I couldn't verify their authenticity. At 6:30, I discovered something that made my situation even worse. Harold had anticipated that I might try to expose his embezzlement, so he had created false evidence that made me appear to be the real thief. Using public Wi-Fi and a borrowed laptop from the coffee shop, I accessed TechVantage's financial systems through my emergency backdoor account. Harold had uploaded doctored bank records showing suspicious transfers from company accounts to offshore banks in my name. He had created fake email correspondence between me and foreign financial institutions. He had even forged authorization codes that appeared to prove I had been stealing money for months. The evidence was sophisticated enough to fool casual observers, and probably sufficient to convince a jury that I was the real criminal. Harold had spent weeks preparing this frame job, anticipating every move I might make to defend myself. But I also discovered something Harold didn't know I could access. His personal email account was synchronized with TechVantage's servers through a security protocol I had implemented months earlier. Reading his recent messages, I learned that he was already planning to flee the country. Harold had booked a private jet to the Cayman Islands for 11:30 tonight. He had transferred the stolen money to banks in non-extradition jurisdictions. He was planning to disappear permanently, leaving Jake and Emma to face criminal charges while he enjoyed retirement on a tropical beach with $8 million in stolen funds. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Harold wasn't just destroying my career and reputation. He was abandoning everyone who had trusted him, including Jake and Emma, who thought they were partners in a plan that would make them all wealthy. Instead, Harold was using them as scapegoats while he escaped with all the money and none of the consequences. Jake would face federal charges for helping with the embezzlement. Emma would lose her law license for her role in covering up the fraud. And I would spend decades in prison for crimes I didn't commit. At 7 o'clock, sitting in that coffee shop with my life falling apart around me, I finally understood the full scope of Harold's plan. He hadn't just stolen money or committed securities fraud. He had orchestrated the complete destruction of everyone who could threaten his escape, including the sister who had trusted him enough to betray her own family. I spent the night in a budget motel in Queens paying cash and registering under a false name. Sleep was impossible. Every news channel was running stories about the TechVantage crisis, and my face appeared on screen every few minutes as the symbol of corporate greed and betrayal. The morning newspapers were devastating. The New York Times ran a front-page story titled, "When Employees Turn Against Their Companies." The Wall Street Journal published an analysis of how my authorization system represented a dangerous precedent for corporate security. USA Today featured interviews with more ruined investors, each story emphasizing how my selfishness had destroyed their financial futures. But the most painful coverage came from the local Brooklyn newspaper, which had somehow obtained quotes from my former neighbors describing me as quiet and strange, and the type of person who seemed like she was hiding something. Using the motel's ancient computer in the lobby, I accessed the public library's database system to continue investigating Harold's financial fraud. What I discovered was worse than I had imagined. Harold's embezzlement wasn't limited to the $8 million I had initially found. Over the past 2 years, he had systematically stolen nearly $15 million through an elaborate network of fake vendors, inflated contracts, and offshore shell companies. Jake had helped by creating fraudulent technical invoicing that made the theft appear to be legitimate business expenses. The fake vendors all had websites, phone numbers, and business addresses that existed only on paper. The shell companies were registered in countries with strict banking privacy laws that made investigation nearly impossible. Emma's role was more extensive than I had realized. Her law firm had provided legal cover for the fraudulent contracts, creating sophisticated documentation that made the theft appear to be routine business transactions. She had used her expertise in corporate law to structure the embezzlement in ways that would be difficult for auditors to detect. But the most shocking discovery was that Harold had been planning this fraud since before he hired me. My authorization system wasn't designed to prevent external hackers. It was designed to be his exit strategy. He had encouraged me to build an unbreakable security protocol because he knew that when the time came to disappear, he could simply fire me and claim that I was holding the company hostage. The IPO was never meant to succeed. Harold's plan was to let it fail, blame me for the failure, and escape with the stolen money while federal investigators focused on prosecuting me for corporate terrorism. At noon, I watched Harold's latest press conference from the motel lobby. He appeared tired and stressed, but still determined to maintain his performance as the wronged executive fighting for his investors. TechVantage's board of directors has voted to offer Ms. Rodriguez complete immunity from prosecution in exchange for her cooperation, Harold announced. We want to resolve this situation peacefully and allow our investors to recover their losses. The offer was meaningless because Harold had already filed criminal charges against me with federal authorities, but it made him appear reasonable and generous to the public, while I continued to look vindictive and unreasonable for refusing to cooperate. A reporter asked, Mr. Brennan, have you been in direct contact with Ms. Rodriguez? We've attempted to reach her through intermediaries, including family members, but she has refused all communication. We believe she may be experiencing a psychological crisis that requires professional intervention. Harold was laying the groundwork for an insanity defense that would allow him to avoid all responsibility for the company's collapse. If I was declared mentally incompetent, he could argue that TechVantage was the victim of an unstable employee's breakdown, not corporate fraud. At 2 o'clock, Jake Patterson appeared on CNBC for his first interview since the crisis began. He looked exhausted and frightened, constantly fidgeting with his hands and avoiding direct eye contact with the camera. Jake, you worked closely with Colette Rodriguez for 3 years, the reporter began. Did you see any warning signs of the behavior she's exhibiting now? Jake's response was carefully rehearsed but poorly delivered. Colette had been under tremendous pressure lately. The IPO preparations, the long hours, the responsibility she carried. I think it affected her judgment and her relationship with management. Did she ever threaten to sabotage the company if her demands weren't met? Jake paused too long before answering. She had mentioned concerns about her compensation and her role in the company's future, but I never imagined she would take such extreme action. Watching Jake's interview, I could see that he was terrified. His answers were evasive, and his body language suggested someone who was lying under duress. I realized that Harold was controlling Jake's public statements probably through threats about his role in the embezzlement. That evening, I discovered something that changed everything. Using my emergency access to TechVantage's email servers, I found correspondence between Harold and a private security company in the Cayman Islands. Harold wasn't just planning to flee with the stolen money. He was arranging for permanent protection from extradition. The emails revealed that Harold had been planning this escape for 6 months. He had purchased a compound on Grand Cayman Island, hired bodyguards with military backgrounds, and established relationships with local officials who could protect him from American law enforcement. But the most devastating discovery was Harold's plan for Jake and Emma. Once he was safely out of the country, Harold intended to provide federal investigators with evidence that would frame both of them as the masterminds of the embezzlement scheme. He had documented their participation in the fraud, while carefully concealing his own role. Jake would be portrayed as a technical expert who used his system's access to steal money. Emma would be described as a corrupt lawyer who provided legal cover for the theft. And I would be presented as their accomplice who turned against them when the scheme was discovered. Harold had manipulated all of us into helping him commit the perfect crime. We had provided the technical expertise, legal framework, and security systems he needed to steal millions of dollars. When the theft was discovered, we would face criminal prosecution while he enjoyed retirement in a tropical paradise. But Harold had made one critical mistake. His email communications with the Cayman Islands security company were routed through TechVantage's servers, which meant they were logged in systems I could access. Every detail of his escape plan, every piece of evidence he had manufactured against us, every step of his fraud was documented in electronic records he thought were secure. As I sat in that motel room reading Harold's emails about destroying the lives of people who had trusted him, I realized that I had two choices. I could continue running, hoping to eventually prove my innocence while Harold escaped with $15 million and 3 innocent people faced decades in prison. Or I could use the evidence I had discovered to expose the truth, destroy Harold's carefully constructed lies, and save Jake, Emma, and myself from becoming his final victims. The decision was obvious, but implementing it would require everything I had learned about computer systems, financial fraud, and corporate security. Harold had spent months planning the perfect crime, but he had underestimated the woman who built the very systems he was trying to exploit. At 9:30 that night, I began planning Harold's complete and total destruction. I needed an ally, someone with credibility and resources that could help me expose Harold's fraud before he escaped to the Cayman Islands. Sitting in that motel room, I remembered reading articles by Marcus Chen, an investigative journalist who specialized in financial crimes and corporate fraud. Marcus worked for the Financial Integrity Project, an independent news organization that had broken several major embezzlement scandals in recent years. His reporting had led to criminal convictions of executives at 3 different companies, and his reputation for thorough investigation made him trusted by both prosecutors and whistleblowers. I found Marcus's contact information through the project's website and sent him an encrypted email at midnight. I'm Colette Rodriguez from TechVantage. Everything you're hearing about me is lies. I have evidence of massive corporate fraud that will shock you. Meet me tomorrow if you want the biggest financial crime story of your career, Marcus responded within an hour. Ms. Rodriguez, I've been covering your situation. I'm skeptical of your claims, but I'm willing to listen. Meet me at Columbus Park in Manhattan at 10 a.m. Come alone and bring evidence. I arrived early wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, constantly watching for police officers or federal agents who might be tracking me. Marcus appeared exactly on time, a thin Asian American man in his 40s, carrying a worn leather messenger bag and looking professionally skeptical. Ms. Rodriguez, I'll be honest. Based on the evidence, I've seen you appear to be a disgruntled employee who's holding your company hostage. I handed him my laptop with the financial fraud evidence already displayed. Look at these bank records. Harold Brennan has stolen $15 million over 2 years. These vendor payments are fake. These contracts are fraudulent. These offshore transfers are embezzlement. Marcus studied the data carefully, his expression gradually changing from skepticism to intense interest. Where did you get this information? I designed TechVantage's computer systems. I have administrative access to everything. Harold and Jake didn't know about my emergency backdoor accounts. These documents could be fabricated. How do I verify their authenticity? I showed him the system logs that documented when each transaction was created, modified, and authorized. Every action on our servers is timestamped and digitally signed. These logs prove when Harold created fake vendor records and when Jake approved fraudulent payments. Marcus spent 40 minutes examining the evidence, cross-referencing transaction dates with news events and stock prices. His investigative instincts were sharp, and his questions helped me organize the evidence more effectively. Colette, this is compelling, but I need independent verification. Can you prove these transactions actually occurred? I can do better than that. I can show you real-time evidence of Harold's escape plan. I opened Harold's personal email account and showed Marcus the correspondence with Cayman Islands Security Services. He's booked a private jet for tonight. He's already transferred the stolen money to offshore accounts. He's planning to disappear permanently and let everyone else face criminal charges. Marcus photographed the emails with his secure camera. This is incredible, but it's also circumstantial. I need someone inside TechVantage to confirm these details. I might be able to help with that. We both turned to see Jake Patterson approaching our bench. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing yesterday's clothes, and obviously sleep-deprived. His hands were shaking as he sat down next to us. Colette, I've been looking for you everywhere. Jake, this is Marcus Chen from the Financial Integrity Project. I'm showing him evidence of Harold's embezzlement. Jake's face went white. Colette, you don't understand. Harold will destroy all of us if this gets out. Jake, Harold is planning to destroy us anyway. Look at these emails. He's going to frame you for the entire embezzlement scheme once he reaches the Cayman Islands. I showed Jake the evidence of Harold's escape plan and his intention to blame Jake for the missing money. Jake read the emails twice, his expression shifting from fear to anger to determination. That son of a bitch. I helped him because he said we were partners. He promised me a share of the money and protection from prosecution. Marcus leaned forward. Mr. Patterson, are you willing to provide testimony about Mr. Brennan's criminal activities? I'll tell you everything. Harold started recruiting me 18 months ago. He said the company was going to fail anyway, and we might as well profit from the collapse. He convinced me that we were saving money from creditors and investors who were going to lose it regardless. Jake's confession provided the corroboration Marcus needed. He had been documenting Harold's instructions, keeping records of their meetings, and saving text messages that proved Harold was the mastermind of the embezzlement scheme. Harold told me that Colette was getting suspicious, so we needed to fire her before she could expose our operation. He said her authorization system would prevent the IPO from proceeding, which would buy us time to complete the final money transfers. But the IPO was supposed to fail anyway, Marcus asked. Harold never intended for TechVantage to succeed. The whole plan was to steal as much money as possible and then disappear before anyone could stop him. As we talked, I noticed Emma walking across the park toward our bench. She must have been following Jake, probably at Harold's instruction. She approached cautiously, clearly surprised to see me with a journalist and her boyfriend. Jake, what are you doing? Harold is looking for you. Emma, sit down. We need to talk about what Harold is really planning. I showed Emma the same evidence I had shown Marcus and Jake. Her initial defensiveness gradually gave way to shock and horror as she realized how completely Harold had manipulated all of us. Emma, look at this email. Harold is planning to claim that you and Jake masterminded the embezzlement. He's got forged documents that make you look like the legal architect of the fraud. Emma read Harold's emails about framing her for criminal conspiracy. This can't be real. Harold said he just needed help with routine corporate transactions. Emma, he used your expertise to structure the embezzlement in ways that would be difficult to detect. You provided legal cover for $15 million in theft. Jake took Emma's hand. We've all been played. Harold convinced each of us that we were helping with legitimate business activities while he was planning to destroy our lives. Marcus was taking notes rapidly. Ms. Rodriguez, do you still have administrative access to TechVantage's systems? Yes, through my emergency backdoor accounts. Can you prove that Mr. Brennan has been stealing money in real time? I opened my laptop and logged into TechVantage's banking systems. Harold's been transferring money to offshore accounts all week preparing for his escape. Look, there's a transfer happening right now. On the screen, we watched Harold move $2 million from TechVantage's operating account to a bank in the Cayman Islands. The transaction was happening while we sat in the park, proving that Harold was continuing his theft, even as federal investigators were supposed to be monitoring the company's finances. Marcus smiled for the first time since we had met. Colette, I think we can bring Harold down, but we need to act fast before he gets on that plane tonight. Marcus, I have an idea. What if we turn Harold's own plan against him? He's expecting to frame us for his crimes. Instead, we can use his authorization system to trap him. I explained my plan to use the TechVantage security protocols as bait. Harold would have to return to the company's servers to delete evidence of his theft and plant false evidence against us. When he did, we could document his criminal activity in real time and provide federal investigators with irrefutable proof of his guilt. It's risky, Marcus warned. If Harold suspects a trap, he'll just disappear tonight and we'll never get another chance. He won't suspect anything. Harold thinks he's outsmarted all of us. His arrogance will be his downfall. Jake and Emma looked at each other, then nodded their agreement. We had all been victims of Harold's manipulation, and we all wanted justice for what he had done to us and to the innocent investors who had lost their life savings. Marcus had one final question. What if this plan fails? What if Harold escapes anyway? I thought about the thousands of people who had trusted TechVantage with their retirement funds, the employees who had lost their jobs when the IPO collapsed, and the investors who blamed me for destroying their financial security. Then we'll have tried everything possible to expose the truth. But I don't think Harold is as smart as he believes he is. He's made mistakes, and those mistakes are going to destroy him. That afternoon, we spent 4 hours planning Harold's complete and total downfall. By evening, we were ready to implement the most sophisticated corporate fraud sting operation ever attempted by a group of private citizens. Harold thought he had won the game, but he had never played against opponents who understood his tactics better than he understood them himself. At 6 o'clock that evening, I sent Harold an encrypted message that would bring him back to New York and into our carefully prepared trap. Harold, I'm ready to cooperate. I'll provide the authorization codes in exchange for $5 million and immunity from prosecution. Meet me at TechVantage tonight at 9 p.m. to complete the transfer. The bait was perfectly calculated. Harold's greed would overcome his caution because he believed he had already won. He thought I was a desperate fugitive willing to trade my principles for money and safety. Marcus had contacted Agent Patricia Morrison at the FBI Financial Crimes Unit, providing her with a complete summary of our evidence against Harold. Agent Morrison was initially skeptical, but the real-time banking records and Harold's escape planning emails convinced her to coordinate with our operation. Ms. Rodriguez, if your allegations are correct, this is one of the largest corporate fraud cases in recent history, Agent Morrison said during our conference call. We'll have federal agents positioned around TechVantage's building, but you'll be taking substantial personal risks. Agent Morrison Harold has already destroyed my reputation and my career. The only way to restore my life is to expose the truth about his crimes. Jake and Emma had spent the afternoon preparing their own evidence for federal prosecutors. Jake provided documentation of every fraudulent transaction Harold had instructed him to process. Emma supplied copies of the fake legal documents Harold had asked her to create, along with recordings of their conversations about covering up financial irregularities. At 8:30, Marcus and I were positioned in TechVantage's executive conference room, surrounded by computers displaying evidence of Harold's embezzlement. Hidden cameras would record everything that happened during our confrontation. FBI agents were stationed in the lobby parking garage and surrounding buildings. Harold arrived precisely at 9 o'clock, accompanied by two men I didn't recognize. They appeared to be private security guards, probably hired to intimidate me into cooperation. Harold's confidence was obvious as he entered the conference room where I had worked for 5 years. "Colette, I'm pleased you've decided to be reasonable." "Harold, I want to see the money before I provide any authorization codes." Harold opened his briefcase and showed me documentation for offshore accounts containing $5 million. "The money is ready to transfer. All I need is your cooperation with the S-1 filing process." "Before we proceed, I want to understand something. Why did you steal $15 million from a company you helped build?" Harold's expression hardened slightly, but his arrogance prevented him from recognizing the danger he was in. "Colette Tech Vantage was never going to succeed long term. The market is too competitive, our technology isn't as revolutionary as we claimed, and our business model has fundamental flaws." "So you decided to steal money from investors before they discovered the truth." "I protected myself from an inevitable failure. Smart executives always have exit strategies." Harold was confessing to securities fraud on camera, providing federal prosecutors with evidence that would guarantee his conviction. But I needed him to admit to framing me for his crimes. "Harold, why did you have to destroy my reputation? You could have stolen the money without blaming me for the company's collapse." "Colette, you were becoming a problem. Your security systems made it difficult to cover my tracks. Your administrative access meant you could discover financial irregularities. Firing you and discrediting you was necessary for my protection. So you decided to frame me for embezzlement I didn't commit." Harold smiled coldly. "I decided to use your authorization system exactly the way you designed it. You built the perfect scapegoat mechanism, and I simply activated it." Marcus stepped out from behind the conference room's projection screen, his camera recording Harold's confession. "Mr. Brennan, could you repeat that last statement for our viewers?" Harold's face went white as he realized he had walked into a carefully orchestrated trap. His security guards moved toward Marcus, but FBI agents entered the conference room with weapons drawn. "Harold Brennan, you're under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, market manipulation, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes," Agent Morrison announced as federal agents surrounded him. "This is entrapment. I was coerced into those statements." "Mr. Brennan, you voluntarily confessed to stealing $15 million and framing an innocent employee for your crimes. These statements were made without duress and recorded with proper authorization." Harold's arrest was broadcast live on every major news network within 30 minutes. Marcus had arranged for real-time coverage of the sting operation, ensuring that the truth about Tech Vantage's collapse would reach the same audience that had been told lies about my involvement. The evidence against Harold was overwhelming. Federal investigators discovered that his embezzlement was even more extensive than we had realized, totaling nearly $20 million stolen over 3 years. His escape plan to the Cayman Islands included detailed instructions for avoiding extradition and maintaining access to the stolen funds. Jake received immunity from prosecution in exchange for his testimony against Harold. He provided complete documentation of Harold's criminal instructions and agreed to forfeit any money he had received from the embezzlement scheme. Emma faced professional sanctions from the New York State Bar, but avoided criminal charges after demonstrating that Harold had misrepresented the legal work he was asking her to perform. She entered a diversion program focused on legal ethics and corporate responsibility. The most satisfying moment came 3 days later, when Agent Morrison called to inform me that Harold had attempted to destroy computer hard drives in his jail cell. The destruction of evidence added obstruction of justice charges to his already substantial legal problems. Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Brennan received a federal sentence of 25 years without possibility of parole. He'll also face state charges in New York for additional financial crimes. Harold's conviction vindicated everything I had tried to tell people about Tech Vantage's financial irregularities. Media outlets that had portrayed me as a corporate terrorist published apologies and corrections. Social media hashtags shifted from TechVantage terrorist to TechVantage hero as the public learned the truth about Harold's manipulation. The board of directors offered me Harold's position as chief financial officer, along with stock options that would make me a millionaire if the company recovered successfully. But I had different plans for my future. 6 months later, I launched Integrity Systems, a cybersecurity company focused on preventing corporate fraud and protecting whistleblowers. My experience with Harold's embezzlement had taught me that traditional financial controls were insufficient against sophisticated internal threats. My authorization system became the foundation for a new approach to corporate security that made embezzlement nearly impossible. Instead of trusting individual executives with unsupervised access to company funds, our system required multiple independent verifications for all significant financial transactions. Jake joined Integrity Systems as our chief technology officer, applying his experience with Harold's fraud to help other companies detect suspicious financial activities. Emma became our legal counsel specializing in corporate governance and regulatory compliance. The three of us had learned that trust without verification was a recipe for disaster, but we had also discovered that people could recover from betrayal and build something better than what had been destroyed. TechVantage recovered stronger than before Harold's fraud. With honest leadership and transparent financial practices, the company completed its IPO 18 months later at $42 per share. Investors who had lost money during Harold's sabotage received full compensation plus additional returns. Most importantly, our experience led to new federal regulations that protect employees who report financial irregularities. The TechVantage Act created legal safeguards for corporate whistleblowers and established criminal penalties for executives who retaliate against employees reporting fraud. A year after Harold's conviction, I testified before Congress about corporate fraud prevention and employee protection. Sitting in that hearing room addressing senators and representatives about the importance of financial integrity, I realized that Harold's attempt to destroy my life had ultimately given me a platform to help thousands of other people. The greatest victory wasn't Harold's imprisonment or my personal vindication. The greatest victory was transforming our worst experience into a force for positive change that would prevent other families from losing their life savings to corporate criminals. Emma and I rebuilt our relationship slowly with conversations about trust, loyalty, and the importance of family bonds that transcend professional relationships. She admitted that her romantic involvement with Jake had compromised her judgment, but she also acknowledged that Harold's manipulation had been sophisticated enough to fool experienced professionals. Jake and Emma married 2 years later, with a ceremony that celebrated both their personal happiness and their professional redemption. I served as Emma's maid of honor, a role that symbolized our family's recovery from the betrayal that had nearly destroyed us. Standing at their wedding, watching two people rebuild their lives after making mistakes that could have ruined them permanently, I understood the most important lesson from our experience with Harold Brennan. People can change, relationships can heal, and trust can be rebuilt stronger than before it was broken. The key is choosing truth over convenience, courage over comfort, and integrity over immediate advantage. Harold chose greed, manipulation, and betrayal, and those choices led to the complete destruction of his life and reputation. We chose honesty, cooperation, and mutual support, and those choices led to personal redemption and professional success. Today, Integrity Systems protects over 200 companies from financial fraud, employing 15 people who might have remained unemployed after corporate scandals. We've prevented an estimated $50 million in embezzlement and helped prosecute 12 executives who attempted to steal from their own companies. But the work that makes me most proud is our Whistleblower Protection Program, which provides legal support and financial assistance to employees who report corporate crimes. We've helped 37 people expose fraud in their companies without losing their careers or facing retaliation. Every person we help reminds me that the courage to stand up against powerful people who abuse their authority is the foundation of a just society. Sometimes that courage costs everything you think you value, but it always leads to something better than what you thought you were protecting. Harold Brennan taught me that trust must be earned through consistent actions, not just given because someone holds an impressive title or speaks with confident authority. He taught me that people who demand absolute loyalty are often planning absolute betrayal. Most importantly, he taught me that the authorization systems we build in our professional lives are less important than the integrity systems we build in our personal character. The real power isn't in the codes that protect computer systems. The real power is in the courage to use those codes to protect the people who trust us with their dreams, their savings, and their futures. That's a lesson worth 25 years in federal prison, and I'm grateful that Harold paid the price for teaching it to me. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where speaking up about wrongdoing felt impossible because of the personal costs involved? How do you think companies can better protect employees who discover fraud or other illegal activities? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you believe that integrity and courage ultimately triumph over greed and manipulation. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the greatest victories come not from avoiding difficult situations, but from finding the strength to face them with honesty and determination. I hope my experience encourages you to trust your instincts, document everything important, and never let anyone convince you that doing the right thing is worth less than protecting the wrong people.